All right. It looks like we're live here. Well, good morning, everyone, or good evening, as the case may be, depending on where you are in this wonderful world. Today, I've got Chad Barraford from Thorchain here today. But before we get to the meat of the conversation, I'd just like to take a second to say thank you to OmniFlix Media and Citizen Cosmos, our sponsors, who are helping me produce this show. Both are amazing Cosmos projects. OmniFlix Media makes a media management platform on top of a Cosmos SDK-based chain. You can go ahead and check it out over at their website. And the Citizen Cosmos team produces a bunch of great content, including my favorite Cosmos podcast. And they also work on Cyberchain, which is a decentralized Google competitor. So fuck Google and welcome. Nice. Well, Chad, thank you very much for joining me today to talk Thorchain. Do you want to tell me a little bit, tell me and the audience a little bit about your background and what got you into the space?
Yeah, I mean, I got into coding in like 2008, I think, 2009, after I saw the Iron Man movie and decided to build a Jarvis. So I taught myself to code. I spent a year building a Jarvis, which was like pretty cool, fun project. And then after that, I was like, oh, this stuff's awesome. So I just started building more and more things and got to the startup scene in Boston, which is where I'm from originally. And then I kind of stumbled my way into crypto in 2017 when I met some guys while I was traveling abroad who told me about Ethereum and Bitcoin and like all this newfangled blockchain technology. So I was just like, oh, this is really cool. So like, I want to learn how blockchains work. So I built a blockchain from scratch, just as an academic sandbox, just to kind of like get a sense of like, how does it actually work underneath the hood? Because if you want to understand how something works, building it from scratch will pretty much force you to learn how it works.
Totally. What was it a proof of work chain?
Yeah, it started off as a proof of work chain. I actually wanted to build in a few different consensus models, just to experiment with different ideas. Like it was intended to be like a Slack, right? It's actually on my GitHub still. It's crappy code.
Oh, cool.
Just kind of vomited out some terrible code just to kind of play around and mess about. But it's like I call it like Black Slack or something like that. Block Slack. I can't remember what I called it, but it was like,
we're gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing code. Don't even read it. But like, it was just like an academic sandbox to mess about. So I started off with like a proof of work idea, and then I moved to proof of authority as like each individual conversation was going to turn into its own blockchain. Never intended to be used by anybody for any reason outside of just development purposes.
Yeah, totally.
It was just a fun thing just to kind of muck about, just like, how would this work if I did this way or that way, or this consensus model versus that consensus model, and just kind of play around with it.
Yeah, totally. And I think I met you the next summer at Interchain Conversations in Berlin. Yep. And was that where you got hooked up with the Thorchain folks?
Yeah, it's funny because at the time, so I did the hackathon in Berlin in, I think it was like July, 2019 or June, something like that.
2019.
2019. Yeah, right. And at the time, I was actually going to interview for some other job at another blockchain company. But then one of the original individuals of Thorchain, it was an advisor to that other project. They're like, hey, just meet me in Berlin for this hackathon and for this Cosmos hackathon and in Germany, which I happened to be living in Berlin at the time, just like pure coincidence. And then I had no idea what Cosmos was at that time. And so I had the day before the hackathon, just like read through the documentation just to kind of get spun up relatively quickly. And so then him and I just started hacking about. He was working the front end code. I worked in the blockchain code. We built like what was the very first lines of code of what Thorchain is today.
Nice. So, there was a white paper. There's been a lot of planning for a long time, and you guys are pretty close to delivering on that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long road. It's been about a year and a half almost, or whatever it's been. Almost 80 weeks or something like
I know that feeling. It's like dog years.
Yeah, it feels a lot longer than it actually is. I mean, I was literally working 9 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week for like at least a year, right?
Yeah.
Like no days off, none of that stuff, just pushing. But yeah, it's been a long time coming. We launched our ChaosNet 5 months ago just to prove the concept, prove the math, prove the economics with real money, real economic, value, which went really well. I mean, right now it's got over 200 and something $million in total value locked right now. And now we're kind of delivering on the original promise, which was like layer one cross-chain swaps, right? Bitcoin to Ethereum, Ethereum to Bitcoin Cash, like to Litecoin to whatever else. And so we'll be launching multi-chain network probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's what's looking at this time, give or take. Don't shoot me if it's shorter or less, more or less. But we're delivering with 5 chains on the go, which is going to be Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and Binance. We're currently working on more like Dogecoin and Zcash and other ones that are kind of in the works. We have even external teams that are also contributing and adding Polkadot and adding Haven and Monero and other things as well. So hopefully the larger community will take over and start adding more and more chains to the network and adding more value. But we'll see how it goes.
Nice. That's really exciting. And once you have one Bitcoin fork, a lot of the machinery is just essentially the multi-sig over on Bitcoin. And then the ability to listen to the node and catch those events. So pretty easy to add more of them. That's really exciting. And as far as timelines go, I know I'm sure you've got people asking you when X, Y, and Z all the time. So I feel you on that.
And you always feel bad when you have to delay because of some new thing came up or something like this the engineering space is hard.
Oh yeah, of course I know. I've been telling people that IBC is going to ship since last June. So
that's the problem, man. You never know the unknown unknowns, right? So like with everything that you're aware of, we can launch this thing in X weeks or X months or whatever it might be. But then, like as you get down the line, you realize, okay, we didn't account. Oh, this is the other thing we had. This other problem we hadn't considered or thought of, or some new bug or some. You never know. If somebody quits, or something like this. Like anything can happen.
Oh yeah.
And all of a sudden your timeline gets shifted.
Yeah, and for me, it's always the unexpected bug that you realize you just didn't write an entire piece of software for, and you're like, oh God, I got to go back and do that now. But I do want to circle back to one thing you just said, which is about $200 million of total value locked on Thorchain. Very impressive, and congratulations. And B, if you look at the DeFi Pulse Index and compare Thorchain and I think Luna, and there's a few other Cosmos-based chains that have a non-trivial amount of total value locked, and those are starting to strike pretty high in that DeFi Pulse Index, and I think growing at a faster rate as well, which is really, really exciting. And when you're talking about cross-chain liquidity, Thorchain is going to be bringing liquidity to folks like Litecoin and BCH, who have been completely unable and shut out of DeFi and able to access that. So
absolutely.
That's I think a really exciting part of the value proposition of Thorchain. And when we're talking about total value locked numbers, those are going to go way, way up. One thing that I see,
right. Like right now, the cap set that we have right now it's only locked into Binance, and it can only swap Binance BEP2 assets, right? But and that's like a lot of money in the system as it is.
Totally.
You figure you add Ethereum and Bitcoin, all these other things. Like right now, I think Binance is like its total market cap is like if all of its assets is around $8 or $9 billion. But if you add those 5 chains I talked about before when we launched multi-chain, it's going to be well over $900 billion, close to $1 trillion of total liquidity that's available to the Thorchain network. That is like more than 100x, right? So I think I'm expecting multi-chain to have a lot more total value locked by a good margin.
Totally. Well, one of the things that, I think has been my experience in this sort of bridge building type stuff is it's really easy to build a bridge to nowhere, but having a compelling reason for users to move their funds over that bridge in the swapping services you guys offer are a compelling reason. There are markets you can find on Thorchain that you're not going to find anywhere else. Then that bridge actually becomes hugely value additive. And if you think about kind of traditional economics where trading between two previously closed economies tends to increase the value of both of those. Like this is the type of thing that we're going to see with Thorchain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The Binance thing, very interesting. I had forgotten that you guys already had Web2 implemented. So with the Ethereum Bridge coming, do you want to talk a little bit about your Ethereum Bridge design? We're going to go nerdy here for a minute because I'm also building an Ethereum Bridge.
Well, yeah. So Ethereum is interesting because it's very different in its design. The bridge to Ethereum is very different in design than any other chain that we're currently connected to. It's fundamentally very different. Binance is a lot easier in the sense because you have instant finality. You don't have to worry about like reorgs or anything like this. And every asset on Binance is effectively, you interface with it identically the same, whether it's the BNB or BTCB or whatever other asset on Binance. That's part of the reason why we chose Binance first as our first kind of kick into it, just because it was a simpler bridge to create, and we could launch quicker and faster. But once we got into the Ethereum world, it's much different because, like ERC20s are very different than like ETH itself. There's, that's partially why, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that like you can't even swap ETH on Uniswap because they wanted to use they had to use the WETH, the wrap token, right? And that's partly that reason because it's like that just adds more complexity. So the way we do it is very different on Ethereum than we do with any other chain. And that we have a smart contract that is very, very simplistic. It has very, very little logic. The actual number of lines of code is like, I think it's like 200 or something, very tiny. Yeah. Just to keep that code as simple as possible and have most of the logic stay on the Thorchain side, not on the Ethereum side.
Who's on the multi-sig on that Ethereum contract? Is that a set of Thorchain validators?
Yeah, it rolls. So like all that smart contract really does is it's like, you can kind of think of it like it's wallets within a wallet. Okay, that's kind of the way you can think about it, in the sense that funds go into it and it gets associated with one of the threshold signatures associated with the network itself. And then those funds can be moved by the network to like say, okay, this group of people have access to like, this $100,000 worth of assets, whatever it might be. And then this, what we call a Yggdrasil vault, which is a one of one of the validators, it gets access to, typically it's like 25% of their bond, whatever that is. And so like it gets moved, the funds get moved around kind of within the smart contract, and then it kind of like changes what validator has access to what, or what group of validators have access to what. But it's all done through
validators. Yeah, what do those validators do with those funds once they have access to them?
Well, so like you can kind of think of like there's two different types of vaults within Thorchain. One is called Asgard, which we use for threshold signatures, right? So you have right now it's 36 nodes in ChaosNet. Whether or not it'd be probably higher, maybe lower, we haven't decided quite yet for multi-chain. It's kind of put your finger to the wind kind of thing. But
totally know how that goes.
There's pros and cons to increasing it, and there's pros and cons to decreasing the number. And so you kind of have to get a sense of what you want to do. But anyways, we have like, you can think of Asgard as like the very secure but slow transactions, because the more members in that party you have, the exponential time it takes to sign a single transaction. So for right now, it's about 15 seconds to do a single transaction with the current Asgards in ChaosNet. The Yggdrasil is like a one-of-one, it's just like a regular old wallet, no multi-sig, no multi-anything. It's just they hold those funds. And so they bond with, let's just say, $1 million, and the network grants them, $250,000 of various assets. So yeah, you have access to these funds so that when people want to do swaps, you're right there and you're really fast. So it's like, it's less secure in terms of its funds, but it's very fast in terms of how fast it can pump out transactions per second, right? But if anybody were to steal from it,
those funds are associated with a bond, so you can slash for misbehavior there.
Right. And so if that node decides to get fancy and say, I'm going to go ahead and steal $100,000 of funds, their bond would be slash 1.5x, whatever it is that they steal. So at no point in any given time does anybody, or even any group of individuals, has access to more funds than what they have at risk. So you will never be in a situation where that's the case, really. And so they're just there to be like, just be fast little to pump out things, because you can't run a network on 15 transactions, or one transaction every 15 seconds. Like that's extraordinarily slow. It would be completely impractical, and it would fall over pretty much instantaneously by swapping from Bitcoin to Ethereum or whatever it might be. And so we have a separate kind of, so that the big guy kind of like big Asgard kind of funds Yggdrasil, and when they get low on funds, I can just pump a little bit more into it. So as a way of like higher throughput, and so it can handle a lot more transactions per second, much faster than even if you were to take every transaction on Bitcoin and Ethereum and Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin, you add them all up, like the total amount of transactions per second, the network can pump out that speed. So it can pump out like crazy fast if it needs to.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, Tendermint has nice performance characteristics. Also, you were talking earlier about Binance Chain being easy to integrate with. That's also another Tendermint Cosmos chain, which is
that it is
pretty cool.
I wonder why it was so easy.
Yeah, it's funny. That's a radically different design from the ETH Bridge that I'm working on, and it leans more heavily on these economic incentives, which I think is really, really cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing this in operation. The ETH Bridge I'm building is each validator within the Cosmos validator set has an associated Ethereum key, and any events going to Ethereum or coming back the other way, they sign with the Ethereum key. And that set of Ethereum keys within the Cosmos validator set makes up a multi-sig on the Ethereum contract that is the entry point into PEGI, or I guess we're calling it Gravity now. And that gets updated periodically as the validator set changes. It is a bit of a slower bridge design for sure, but it just has different trust properties. It leans a lot more heavily on the cryptography rather than the economic security, which, these are the trade-offs and the types of system design that you see in these bridge technologies, and it's fascinating to me. Nice. Well, so that's V1, and you talked about a couple of the more exciting things coming up in terms of other bridges. What do you guys have planned for V2?
Yeah, so V1, we just wanted to satisfy what the white paper originally was promising, which is layer 1 swaps. V2, we want to really kind of pivot to help the larger Cosmos ecosystem. And so I think we're going to be offering synthetic assets that are pegged to Bitcoin or pegged to Ethereum or Litecoin or Ripple or whatever assets that are on the network at that given moment. There will always be an available synthetic asset that is always going to be pegged to that value. And so you can take your Bitcoin, swap it into synthetic Bitcoin, and then you're on the Cosmos ecosystem where you can now use IBC to send that synthetic Bitcoin to, some derivatives exchange, or, Kava's CDPs or Terra's, whatever. Like you can have access to that liquidity without needing to for other Cosmos chains to build a bridge to Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these things. They can just like take our liquidity. It's freely available to you. I think that's going to be a really good contribution to general space. One of the things that we're talking about doing too is lending platform similar to Aave or Compound. And because we're cross-chain, we already have a really good kind of incentive of why you'd use Thorchain over Aave, because you can take an actual Bitcoin loan, right? Or a Bitcoin Cash loan if you really wanted to. That's pretty big. I think that's pretty amazing, actually, I think, at least in my eyes. We're also thinking about how we can do actual fixed rate lending. So you can take a loan out at 12% rate, whatever the rate might be at that moment, and you're just locked in at 12% for the duration of that loan. It's not going to fluctuate up or down, and that kind of security or that kind of knowledge of what's going to happen in the future makes it just a better loan in many respects. Especially if you want to take a really large loan, like renting out, mortgaging a house or something like this, or getting money for buying a house in Bitcoin or something like this. You could theoretically do that with a fixed loan, but you probably would not want to do that in a variable loan that you would see on Compound.
Yeah. Nice. I do see one question over in the chat, and we do take questions at the end, so folks, please go ahead and add them. Somebody's asking, why not add Atom? And one of the things Chad has not really explicitly said, but has implied a number of times, is that Thorchain will be adopting IBC as soon as it's available, and Thorchain will be easily routable via IBC and all other IBC enabled chains. So if you're in the Cosmos ecosystem, if you're an investor in any of these projects, if you use any of these other chains, Kava, Cosmos, Terra, Akash, or there's like SIFChain, there's a ton of these other projects out there. All of this stuff that Chad's talking about is going to be available from your ecosystem pretty trivially.
Yeah.
So that's a really exciting part.
We were actually employing someone from the Cosmos community, one of the senior engineers there, to help build a Cosmos bridge to Thorchain, so you could do add-on. But then the whole IBC thing was like looking like it was solidifying, and you guys launched Stargate and all this kind of stuff. So we were like, oh, why don't we just do an IBC bridge rather than building the way we're building like a Bitcoin bridge or Bitcoin Cash bridge. And so I think what's going to happen, and hopefully in the future, is that we'll support IBC, coins that are being via Atom over IBC, or any of those other assets that are available part of the network, and you'll be able to stake that or add a liquidity into the Thorchain pools to do that.
That's really exciting. One last project, part of Thorchain that I really personally like, having worked in these decentralized ecosystems for a while. Thorchain's funding a lot of teams outside of the core team. Thorchain's really smartly trying to use their treasury to build this platform. Talk a little bit about the way you view decentralization and how that's going to work moving forward.
Yeah, no, this is something we've, like, from a core perspective, the team believes very strongly, is that we don't want to be the center of it all, right? We don't want to be the controllers of it all. We don't want that at all. We're here to kind of give birth to it in a sense, but then push it out into the community for them to maintain and hold. So we start off a very meager amount of investment in the very beginning. I think it was like around $1 million, which is nothing compared to the crypto space where you have billion-dollar things go up. But we took that, we grew it out to, I think last time I looked, it was around like a $14 million treasury, which we give out monthly reports every month about how much money we have and where the money's going and all these things, which is available on our blog if you want to check it out. But we've made the determination to, instead of hiring more people into the core team, if you want to call them that, is to hire people externally, right, and pay them to do it as separate entities, and so they'll take over those things entirely. For example, there's a couple block explorers that exist that was funded by Thorchain. Their Midgard, which is like our RESTful API on top of the blockchain, is now owned by Delphi Digital. There's all sorts of external projects that are being done to help contribute UIs, wallets, like all these things are being created, and we're going to push out all those funds to the greater community. And our intention, actually, as a team, we've been public about this, is to have a planned obsolescence in July 2022. So the team is going to basically disband at that point, and the rest of the funds will be divvied to various teams externally, and some individual just take over some of the funds. We'll just give the funds out to people to maintain Midgard and maintain the core protocol and maintain this, and just divide it up entirely. We always want to make sure we're pushing the decentralization aspect to what this project is, and make sure that we don't have any centralized figures or team members over the long term.
You're starting to see some really exciting teams come into the ecosystem as well. I saw an announcement, I think it was yesterday or the day before, with a team with a really impressive pedigree. What was the name of that team? Do you remember? They're
coming into the Thorchain. There's been a few. Which one are you talking? I'm not even sure which one I'm actually able to release publicly or not, so I don't want to say it.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was, I have to dig through my Twitter here, and I don't want to do that on the call. But it was a couple of ex-IDEO folks, if I remember correctly. Anyway, that is one of the aspects of the Thorchain project that is most exciting to me. Cosmos has long been this super strong standard bearer of decentralization, but because of the way the project was funded, the ICF has a lot of those funds, and only now is the Cosmos community pool starting to flex its muscles, spend some money on marketing, figure out how to fund some of these things like the AMM, and other projects that have taken our software and built on top of it have taken much more advantage of these features that enable this type of decentralization. And that's really exciting to me.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up here, any last items that you want to chat about, Chad?
I mean, I think that we're all very excited about Thorchain's progress. I mean, the token's been performing very, very well, which is fantastic. It kind of shows the adoption.
It is alt season today, in case anyone doesn't know.
I'm checking the prices today. I think everything's green across the board, more or less, right? That's happening there.
One of those kind of days.
Yeah, man, that happens. You can have green days. You can have a sea of blood, and other days, anybody's been in the space long enough knows you just kind of shrug all that stuff off, right?
Yeah.
No, but we're all just excited. We've launched our testnet, which is out there, improving that all the technology works for cross-chain swaps and all this kind of stuff. And so we're really excited to be launching the multi-chain network in the coming weeks, and that's going to be, this is my opinion, it's going to be an inflection point of when people kind of realize the power and the flexibility and the significance, the hair on fire problem that Thorchain is now solving for the greater cryptocurrency community. And so people are going to become awoken to this DEX that is you can get from one chain to another, which is going to be like huge, right? But it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because that's probably going to push the prices of gas quite significantly, I'm assuming, right? So
on Thorchain?
No, on like Ethereum, on Bitcoin, right? Because all of a sudden you go from swapping your Bitcoin to some sort of off-chain thing like Coinbase or Binance, and now you're going to start swapping on layer 1. And so that's going to cause more transactions on those chains, which is going to cause the gas price to go even higher, which is going to be interesting to see how that kind of happens, how that kind of plays out.
Yeah, that will be interesting. This whole L2 narrative, and which, I really don't like that distinction. I think we were talking about this a little bit before we came on the air. They're all just blockchains, and each of them has a slightly different security property. And there's a lot of ways where you can build programmatic links between them. And IBC is only like the most formal of those ways. But, as we were talking about bridge designs earlier in this call, there's a lot of different ways to do these types of bridges. And I think what we're increasingly seeing is a interconnected network of independent cryptoeconomic systems that is becoming increasingly fluid, and the ability to move liquidity easily throughout that network, utilize it in various protocols along the way, and then bring it back home or move it out to a centralized exchange via something like USDC, which also gives users cross-chain capabilities. What we're starting to see is something that looks a lot more like the internet and a lot less like an L1, L2 kind of false dichotomy, I think. So that's definitely something I'm tracking during this bull market, is how quickly that shift happens. And how quickly I have to stop hearing people say L2, which is not soon enough.
I mean, you're right. I mean, it is a little bit of a misnomer in a sense, right? And it's going to be interesting that we'll see kind of the non-whales slowly get pushed out of layer 1 Ethereum and even layer 1 Bitcoin over the coming months, and we'll have this kind of war, so to speak, between all the L2, solutions out there, so to speak. And Thorchain's one of them, and Cosmos is another one of them, in one sense. And we'll see how it kind of manifests over time. But it's definitely going to be a fascinating year. 2021 is going to be that's going to be one of the things people are talking about a lot.
Chad, I think that what Cosmos has an advantage in is a lot of these other L2s that are branding themselves as L2s are standalone chains. Matic came out and just said that they want to be the Ethereum's internet of blockchains. But we've been building the internet of blockchains over here for quite a while. And what we're creating is a networked layer 2 network, if you want to think about it that way. And that's a lot more powerful than any one individual chain. And I think
for sure,
the market is really starting to wake up to what we've been building.
Oh, 100% agree. Like the future of DeFi are going to be the chains or the apps that are chain agnostic or asset agnostic. To say that you're going to pick a horse, so to speak, whether it be Ethereum or something else, and just like this is my horse is like there's nothing else. It's a little bit silly to me. The apps that will actually succeed are the ones that are agnostic, and those apps will and those chains that are agnostic like that, like Thorchain's agnostic, IBC is agnostic as well, Cosmos is agnostic. Like because those chains will have access to a lot more funds. Bitcoin, for example, and Ethereum by themselves is like close to close to $800 billion. That's where you're going to see all the liquidity is going to be happening on those chains, and there's little illiquid chains like you're going to see on Ethereum, relatively speaking, in the future. They'll still be there, they'll still exist, and they'll still do what they do. But in the end, the thing that'll win are the ones that are agnostic to chain, agnostic to asset. That's really important in the future. And I think Cosmos is actually a great example of that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's a great place to stop. Chad, thank you very much for joining us this week. I really appreciate you coming to talk a little bit more about Thorchain. And before we wrap here, I just want to say thank you to our sponsors, OmniFlix Media and the Citizen Cosmos folks. And I will see you all next week. Guest still TBD, but I think I'll find somebody fun to bring on. But anyway, thank you everyone, and see you guys soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.